Welcome to the Driven to Succeed Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Olson. Today, I have a great guest, Tim Spreck from the Grant Johnson Group, EXP. Tim, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the last few weeks, having a couple transactions going. And I really was interested in this particular episode because I really wanted to dig a little bit deeper into, as a parent, buying an investment property for your son or daughter or your children.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate being on with you today. For my wife and I, this kind of led to us being the owner of several rental properties. And the way we started out was our oldest daughter got married, and they were just a young couple starting out, had fresh new jobs. They had lived in Oregon for a couple years, but then they moved back to Minnesota. And the question became, can we afford to buy a house, and can we even afford to pay rent? And we started looking around at properties, and my wife and I had some extra cash that we could invest. And we started having a conversation about what would happen if we bought property and put our kids into it at a price that they could afford for a monthly rent. Of course, they had to bring something to the table too. They were shoveling snow, they were mowing the lawn, they were helping me do some maintenance around the place. And that kind of led us to invest in several real estate properties, income properties. And our youngest daughter lived in one of the units of our triplex for a number of years, and she just ended up buying herself a house. So it was kind of a transition, and our oldest daughter and her husband are now in the process of also buying a house. So it was kind of a transition from trying to get them into some place they could afford and then moving forward to where they're going to be homeowners on their own. So it was a great progress.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting journey in how you started that because it wasn't like you set out to be an investor and buy rental properties, but because of the situation, it brought you in. And this is why I've been wanting to do something like this for a while for followers and, people and talking to other real estate agents, and other parents, as your children grow up and they go off to college and maybe the first year they have dorm, right? And then after that, then they're going to go into, student housing, or apartment living or, live in another building. But, I was talking to a guy and he's like, yeah, this, it's, with the new program, with the programs out there, what you can do is, buying, because if specifically, if you can put your children in, you can buy, like a single family residence, maybe 4 bedroom, and put 5% down, even though it's going to be an investment property for you per se. But if you're putting your child on it as a primary residence, they're going to live there and they can go on the mortgage with you in the beginning. You can put 5% down, rent out the other rooms, and then completely subsidize the payment or maybe even cash flow, depending on how much you can get for those rooms and so forth. So, and, obviously putting 20% down is better because then you don't have mortgage insurance and so forth. But for a lot of people, it's really good way if you don't have a ton of money and you're going to be paying expensive, like you said, apartment living, right? Or, helping them with the cost of school.
Yeah, and I think, Brandon, this is really a positive idea for a lot of people, just simply because if you're paying rent, you're just shelling out money every month for your kids to go to school. There's no building of equity. You're not teaching them how real estate works, and they can be a part of the process. I think for a young person to go to a closing as a part owner in a property that they're going to help manage, I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone today because it kind of sets their foot on the path of being responsible, becoming an adult, investing, and thinking about the future.
Yeah. I have another agent I do a lot of transactions with over the last 10 years, and his parents helped him do that. And he bought his first house on campus, and then he bought another one. And he ended up owning four multifamily homes on St. Cloud State campus. And, and it then what did that do? He was working a couple other jobs and he's like, well, I can just get into real estate. Got his license, and became a licensed real estate. And now he does a ton of transactions, right? So he built his, environment that way too. So, you coming into it, that wasn't exactly your plan, but that worked out with your first child and then along with the second one. What other tips, obviously not being a CPA or a financial advisors, but what other things that can you get into that were beneficial for you as the homeowner and as from taxes and so
Sure.
forth?
And of course, we want to make sure people understand that I'm not a attorney and I'm not a CPA,
Right.
but I am speaking as a person who has experience in these areas. So the nice thing, there are tax advantages to buying a property and installing one of your family members in it. Number one, you should be able to homestead the property. Number two, since it is potentially an income producing property, you can probably write off a lot of the expenses associated with it, whether it be maintenance, upkeep, interest on the loan, oftentimes. So there are additional financial benefits too, rather than just putting your son or daughter in a safe place where you are potentially building equity as well.
That's awesome. I mean, it just again, you're helping yourself out financially, building wealth. You're helping your child understand what that looks like as well, right? Um, and them having skin in the game. And like you said, I think you had said earlier, you make sure that they help with those maintenance, right?
Mhm.
They know what it's like to be a homeowner now, right? So many, that's the other thing is right now that's uh, it. There are so many millennials, maybe Gen Zs that think that buying a home is just too far out of the picture, right? That they can't afford it. Their parents could, but they can't, right? And I think this is a real true testament that with a little bit of help from the parents, it can help both the parents and the child financially, and then set them up to be that homeowner um, in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps them start thinking bigger in terms of what the future can be and what they can do to help improve their situation because all of a sudden they're not just thinking about going out to bars and going to restaurants every night and doing things that are just net losses of money essentially
Right,
and thinking about maybe I shouldn't be going out tonight. Maybe I should be saving a little bit or paying additional equity on the loan or however you want to go about it.
right. And you know, even if it's just, let's just say it's 3 or 4 years in college, and if you're subsidizing that with roommates and so forth, and again, that's where I guess I personally would, you know, uh, recommend because that really helps that offset that payment, um, is getting those roommates in there and helping pay those costs, but and then also teaching them to understand what that looks like going forward too,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I've seen some people just build some great portfolios starting out that way and, you know, becoming a single family home to a multifamily home. And I have a client of mine, it was one of my first clients. It was funny. He talks a ton, and my old boss was like, "Here, you can have him, right?" And he turned out to be like the first 5 years, I think we did 4 transactions together, and now and I think he's in his early 30s now, but he's buying apartment buildings at this point. And so the growing your wealth through investment properties and just having that direction is huge.
Yeah, and I think we should probably back up a little bit to the discussion about having roommates because that's a great way to help pay all of the bills, essentially.
Right.
I remember when I first started going to school, we rented a small half of a duplex. There was 6 people in there. We each paid $100. And of course, this is back in the ancient times, but what it did was it helped to pool, and this could be applied to this purchase that we're talking about too, of an income property. Of course, there are a few things you want to be concerned about. You want to make sure that you're following whatever uh, rules, laws that the local municipality might have in terms of the number of people that are allowed in a property, et cetera, et cetera. You may be subject to requirements for having a license or a certificate of occupancy, et cetera. So people should think about all of those things as well. But the model is really solid.
Right.
If you're able to have people come in as roommates and pay all the bills for you, then you're looking at a really positive cash flow situation where you're building equity. And when it's time to sell the property, you may actually be in a profit position on that particular home.
Exactly. I mean, it's, that's where the biggest, unknowns to a lot of younger buyers, right? First time home buyers is like, okay, I was paying 18.95 for my rent, and now I'm going to buy a house and it's going to be 24.95 or 24.50 or whatever. It's 2,400 bucks. It's, 600 bucks more. But now I have electrical, gas, I have all the maintenance on top of it, so they get really scared about that position, right? And so then, you know, by doing it this way, and you have, starting off with that those roommates and whatnot, and being helping to pay that electrical bills and all those bills, like you said, it really is definitely a helpful situation. But going back to, if we're talking specifically, and maybe they don't go to college, so you're maybe not near a college, but if you are like for a college or whatever, or near a college, you're gonna have all those rules because there's gonna be heavy rentals in there in the municipalities, right? So you definitely want to look into those rules first and foremost. But I have to imagine they're nothing too crazy. You just can't put 10 people in a four-bedroom home.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're all they have formulas worked out,
Right.
number of bedrooms, square footage, etc., however they arrive at it.
Sure.
But you know, the situation is definitely advantageous. You can put some roommates in. The question is how many?
Oh, right, right.
Six guys in a place. Back in the old days, that was something that was done, but today you probably wouldn't want to do that.
Right. I'd be worried about six guys in a place anyway, what it's gonna look like. Um, well, let's talk about, so like on my end, on the financing end, right? So, and I don't know what you did if you put 20% down or if you put 5% down, but I mean, that's where I think it becomes really advantageous because a lot of people, again, don't know what they don't know, right? I mean, there's still a myth out there that you have to put 20% down to buy a house. And that's not true. Now, if it's an investment property, you can get away with a 15% down, but the rate and costs are way out of whack. So it doesn't usually cash flow on an investment property, the 15% down when you're trying to rent it out. And realistically, that's 20. But this is an investment property per se, but being able to utilize the actual programs like Fannie and Freddie and buying this house for your child and putting them as on it as a primary residence as well. So let's back up a little bit. What does that look like? So, and I don't know if you've done this for your children at all, but a lot of people that I know is like there's a really good hack to give them good credit to start out with, right? And I know my buddy put his kids on at 2 years old, put them on his American Express card, right? And it's got a $35,000 limit, and his balance is always paid off every single month. Well, by the time they're 18, their credit score is through the roof, right? But it does still work even if you have, you know, I tell people all the time is like if you have one credit card that you really don't use but it's open for a long time. Like I personally have a nice Capital One card. I've had it open for 22 years and I can put, like an authorized user on that, and that whole history comes into their name, right? So you can get a good score. So part of going into the transaction is making sure that you do, if you can, if you have, a credit card that's been open for a while, and it's got to be a major credit card, can't be a Home Depot card or Macy's card or anything, but um, a major credit card, Discover, Amex, Capital One's a good one, Visa, right? And you put them on as an authorized user. You don't even have to give them a card, right? You can just put them on as an authorized user. So that history starts building and building their credit up, which helps them when they do need to get, student loans are pretty easy to get, but like a car and so forth, having a good score is going to help with that. But that really goes into when buying the house too. So they don't have to have a job because if your income and your ability to purchase the home supports all of that, um, then that just supports that payment. That really helps buy that home and do 5% down, minimal down. And depending on the situation, mortgage insurance today these days are not that expensive if you have good credit and multiple borrowers on it, and our debt to income is okay, right? So it's really minimal. So not putting down the advantage of 5% versus 20%, let's just say it's a $300,000 home on campus, and that's, 60,000 versus 15,000, before closing costs, right? Is a big difference. So that's where I guess I wanted to start, like, for people out there, that, hey, this is a good idea, or plan for that. Maybe maybe your kids are teenagers right now, and that's something you can start planning towards, and putting that away, and then just utilizing that load money down to build that, and then build yourself a little bit of a portfolio.
Yeah, and I think, you know, building credit for a young person is so important. Um, with our daughters, what we did is, when they got old enough, they had a credit card. It was from my bank, so I was in control of what was going on. They could experiment if they wanted to go to the store and buy, an outfit or something for however much, $50. Then the bill came in. We were able to review it, and then when it was time to pay, then they had to pay, and they understood that if they were late, there was a consequence. Not only was dad going to be unhappy, but it would also affect their credit score. So just helping them go through those little exercises when they're young, developing smart, responsible sort of habits related to finances is a great thing. And then when they do get to that point where you're looking to buy a home, put them on the purchase with you, then they have excellent credit.
Right. That's awesome. That's the best advice you can give, right? Specifically, not just, going back to what I said, you can put people on just to give them that score, right? But what the way you are mapping it out for them and actually teaching them about that, like, hey, this $50 outfit, if you don't pay the bill, A, there's a late fee, right? And B, if you don't want to carry this balance, because then there's going to be interest on it. Now it's $60, right? So you got to pay it somewhere,
Yep.
right? And I've been looking at credit for 20 years, close to 20 years. I think this is 19 years now. I've been looking at credit from auto finance to here, and what I've seen, number one, student loans have quadrupled, and that's a whole nother discussion. But just how many people that do carry balances so much, right? And it's just, what that affects buying a home. What does that do when you're getting a car too, and what it does for rates. So by being, um, taking those steps and those exercises and showing them that, and giving that worth, it really does. I mean, obviously, they're sitting in very good positions, and helps them on the future. Really sets them on the path. So let's talk about Tim. What was your journey like before? You've been in real estate for what, 2.5 years now, right?
As a licensed
As a
agent, yeah.
licensed agent. Yep. Um, and what did you do prior to that?
You know, my wife calls me a serial entrepreneur because I tend to see something and then say, "Hey, I can turn that into a business." So I've done this my entire life. So when I was 10 years old, I started out messing around with antique furniture, refinishing and repairing, and that actually turned into about a 30 plus year career where I owned a very large antique mall in downtown Stillwater for a number of those years, the last 10 plus years. Then the business started to change, and I was ready to look around and see what the next step was. So I became a contract lobbyist down at the Capitol. I've been doing that now for more than 15 years, close to 20 years. But the real passion for me was real estate. I bought my first house when I was 21 years old. It was a complete dump. I worked on it, restored it, got it to a position where I was able to sell it at a profit. And during that time, I actually did have roommates that rented from me. Got married. My wife wasn't into having roommates hanging around drinking beer at 3 in the morning. So we sold that place, bought another one, completely restored it. And during that process, we realized that we were actually really good at it. My wife has a design background, and she's also done corporate real estate management. So it was kind of the sort of the coming together of our two talents where we could work together on things we were passionate about. We love old homes, we love architecture, Currently, we live in St. Paul, so we're within walking distance of Summit Avenue and all those really beautiful old Victorian mansions and that entire area. So, real estate was always in our background and it was going to be in our future one way or the other. And so we got into the rental properties, which we've discussed, keeping them running, dealing with the tenants, all the maintenance, doing most of the work myself. And then the next progression was getting my license and selling real estate. And for me, the sweet spot really is the investment properties, but also the young buyers. I love helping young people understand the market, explain it to them, take the time, sit with them. They need to learn about financing. They need to learn um, how properties are bought and sold. And having a partner like your firm to work with has really been fantastic because your people take the time to sit and answer questions and get creative in ways that will help them to get into a home. So partnering with you has really been fantastic because we can put our heads together and we can get somebody into a home where other realtors might just think, you know what, it's a young person, they don't have any money. I'm not going to make a commission on a $200,000 home, and they're moving on to something else. But for me, that's a real passion. So real estate is kind of where I intend to spend the rest of my working years.
That's awesome. I truly like that. I mean, that journey is great. Because you learned young, you bought your first house, you did all that, and then it solidified where you're at today, helping young buyers and going through all the needs. I get the most gratification out of that because it's the one of the best things that first time home buyer can have, right? Is it's excitement, it's nervous, it's everything, right? Um, and many people are truly grateful, and I pride myself on trying to do the best job I can to show them financially. And I came from the car industry where it was, you wanted to you sell and make a commission, but your job is to you know and sell the car for as much as you can, or the financing, whatever, right? And it's still a deal that you're still doing it responsibly. I'm not trying to say it's not. I'm not trying to put a bad light on the car industry, but that's different. Today, it's here. How can I help somebody the best I can, right? Because there is none of that markup and that other stuff, right? It's just helping find the best ways to buy a home, whether it's, oh, the payment's too high. Well, here's a way we can do it, like a 2-1 buy down, where the first year you're paying effectively an interest rate that's 2 points lower than the market. So that really helps on that payment. A lot of times you're talking, $300,000 house is going to be $400 a month cheaper with a 2-1 buy down the first year. And then the second year is $200 a month. And then it goes up to the full payment at the third year. So explaining how that works and working with the agents to get that done has been pretty good. We got ways that we're the seller doesn't want to pay closing costs. Well, can we finance it in, right? Say this $300,000 house. Well, we have to move it to 310, and then we get $10,000 to cover that the closing costs. But anyway, explaining that, helping the agents understand it, and helping that buyer, and it really helps ease that first year of like, oh, payment's going to go up $600 a month, right? And so forth. But yeah, it's been fun, and it's great working with somebody, and being a team and being able to explain the things with everybody, and making sure we get to closing and everybody's happy. And that's the best part of my job anyway, even though it's some days like right now I got a couple of closings I'm a little bit stressed about because we got things beyond our control, like the sellers can't get something and whatnot. But it is what it is. It's still I'm super grateful that I got into this industry, and being on the real estate side, it sure opened my eyes to a lot of different things and new paths and so forth. um, but Tim, it was great having you on the show today. I mean, your knowledge is fantastic, and anybody out there that has any questions, whether you're looking at helping your son or your daughter or child buy a home, reach out to Tim. Tim's obviously got the experience, and he can help you throughout the process. Um, please like and subscribe. We'll have all of Tim's details on coming forward for you too as well. But Tim, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.